It's such an honor once again to welcome Dr. Zelenko, a legendary person whose Zelenko's cocktail was in a way endorsed by President Donald Trump. And we have to say, despite all the controversies that were initiated by World Health Organization removed its opposition and actually said that it was absolutely false study that they relied upon their decision to oppose this particular treatment. And it seemed like we needed to see that it will be endorsed, at least the clinical studies. And suddenly we see that FDA in America removed its endorsement of using this medication even for, that they gave for emergency need. So in the case it's an emergency, they allowed it. Now they removed even that. Where does it leave us today, Dr. Zelenko?
Hi, Rabbi Kitson. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorite interviews to do with you. So it's not exactly like you said. I'd like to clarify to you exactly what the FDA did and what the WHO is doing, and then show you how propaganda is being used. So let me explain. The FDA removed the emergency use authorization for hydroxychloroquine. Let me explain to you exactly what that means. Actually, it's a very big gift from the FDA, and I want to say thank you, because what the emergency use authorization did specifically was it opened up government resources, a government stockpile of medication for the use of hydroxychloroquine in the hospital setting. That was all that it did. However, effectively what it did was it made the use of hydroxychloroquine in the outpatient, out of the hospital setting, almost impossible, because the rationale was like this, that if the FDA gave permission only for the hospitals, that means it's implying that outside the hospital it's not meant to be used. That was never the case, by the way. And in America, any drug that is FDA approved is a physician is able to use it legally for off-label purposes. There's legal precedent for this. However, because of the EUA, that's the emergency use authorization, that the FDA did, employers from hospital settings and large organizations banned physicians from using it in the out of the hospital setting. So actually what the emergency use authorization did was restrict and limit the ability for physicians like myself to use this medication for patients that are not in the hospital. So it was a terrible, it wasn't emergency use, it was emergency prohibition of hydroxychloroquine. So you would think that the FDA taking away this terrible authorization, which really wasn't an authorization, would be helpful. So legally, that's exactly what they did. And the president himself and the Homeland Security Secretary, I think Azar, said in a conference afterwards that all they did was remove an obstacle to the use of this medication. But this is the problem with the FDA, and this is where they would make Joseph Goebbels, a Nazi propaganda minister, proud. And this is the what did they say? What should have they said? The FDA is removing the EUA, which means that we're taking away its recommendation to be used in the hospital setting because it doesn't work in the hospital setting. However, it does not mean that it doesn't work in the early stages of the disease. And this authorization that we had used limited the ability of physicians to actually use it in a setting where it may work. So we're taking it away to make the drug more accessible to primary care physicians. And we need to do more work, more research to see how effective it is in the primary care setting. That's what they should have said. You know what they said? FDA is removing the emergency use authorization. You know what that means? Every single physician in this country now thinks the way you thought and is afraid to use this drug. Here's the propaganda. Here's the power of propaganda. So the president himself had to go on national television and explain what I just explained. Unfortunately, every country in the world, including most Americans, don't understand what I just said, and they feel, like you just said, the FDA took away the authorization to use this medication. It's so evil. It's so unbelievably. I mean, it's brilliant, but it's brilliant for the wrong side, for the side of lying. Anyway, so that's my statement there. So in reality, if any physician is hearing this, you are more free to use this medication now than you were before. With that said, the WHO, which I like to call the World Homicide Organization, what it's done is it continues to this day base its decisions on retracted studies, on fraudulent studies. And even though these studies have been withdrawn, many countries in the world are still following the recommendations that were based, the WHO recommendations that were based on fraudulent studies. And actually the FDA, here's another thing, in its removal of the authorization, quotes fraudulent studies that have been retracted as basis for their decisions. So you could see here, this is beyond deception. This is outright brazenness and lying to the public in order to be in line with a false narrative, which is to demonize this medication and hurt the president and help the pharmaceutical industry. So that's my criticism for. Well, that's all I want to talk about evil this time. I want to focus now on light and optimism and hope, and tell you what's coming. So my study has been submitted. My study, which I'll give you a summary quickly, has been submitted now for peer review, and it will become available for download and review by anyone in the world on Monday or Tuesday from a server called preprints.org, which basically it becomes public at that point. So, and I'll tell you what the study will show. If you use the medication according to the Zelenko protocol, which I'd like to refresh your memory what that is, because it's important. Number one is you have to cherry pick out the patients that are high risk. You have to identify patients that if they would get coronavirus or COVID-19, that they have a high risk of dying, okay? And if those patients get sick, you have to treat them within the first 5 days of symptoms. Like you do with every other infection and every other aspect of medicine, you treat much better to treat earlier than later. It's much easier to put out a small fire than a large fire, right? And number three is to use a 3-drug regimen of zinc, which is the most important thing, hydroxychloroquine, and azithromycin. And just to give you the analogy, zinc is a bullet that kills the virus. Hydroxychloroquine is the gun that shoots the bullet. And the azithromycin is the bulletproof vest that the shooter wears. So, in other words, a gun without a bullet and a bullet without a gun, completely useless. You need the combination of the two. And the studies that show you that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work by itself, it's true. Just like a gun won't do anything without any bullets. So you need to combine the two. You need to be able to deliver the medication into the place where it needs to be so it can kill the virus. And to prevent complications, you take the antibiotic to prevent pneumonia and pulmonary complications. Very elegant, very simple idea. I've explained it many times. It costs $20, the treatment. It's available in oral form, so by mouth. And these are very safe drugs. There's no concern about any safety issues at all. And any propaganda about its safety risks is nothing more than that, and is designed to scare the public and has nothing to do with reality. I take it myself, my parents take it, everyone, a smart doctor that I know takes it, the President of the United States takes it, and not to mention other world leaders that I'm personally aware of. So any person in position of power or influence has this medication in reserve because they're smart. So but I would advise all of humanity, you're just as important as everyone else. You're a human being, you have a spark of God in you, and you deserve to be treated the same way as the rich and the famous and the powerful. So I'm talking to you, and I'm saying to you that you deserve the best information available, and that information is the following. You have nothing to worry about COVID-19 if the resources are put into place. Right now, people are not dying from COVID-19, they're dying from deception, and they're dying from manipulation of information and concealment, the stealing of information. And the world deserves to know the truth. And the truth is like this, that this is an infection, it's a bad infection, but it's treatable. And you just have to identify the high-risk patients, treat them early, and treat them with a very simple combination of drugs. And then you're going to, this is what my study shows, that if you use it in the way I just mentioned before, there's an 84% reduction in the need for hospitalization. In other words, of all the patients that ended up in the hospital in America, let's say, if they were treated with my approach, 84% of them would not have needed to go to the hospital. Do you understand what that means? So that's the solution to the respirator crisis, right? You don't need respirators. And my patients had a 99.7% survival rate. Meaning out of my patients that I saw, 99.7 survived with COVID-19. So, I mean, that's published. That's going to be revealed to the world with extremely high levels of statistical significance in a way that the scientific community will be forced to accept it, even though they're going to try to spin it as not true, but 1 + 1 = 2. There are going to be some people saying 1 + 1 = 7, but that doesn't make it so. And then we're going to have partners, and this is where the public can come in to spread the good news, because there's going to be a lot of propaganda against it because it's true. So whenever I hear the WHO, or even now, unfortunately, the FDA, CDC, NIH, all these organizations come out against something, to me, it's a sign that the opposite is true. To me, it's a sign that there is something of value that's good for humanity that they're trying to suppress for their own unfortunate reasons that are not in your best interest. Let's put it this way. Okay. You have any questions, sir?
Yeah. What do we expect actually after the publication, and how we can help you save the world?
Without giving out too much information, let's just put it this way. Some of the most powerful people in the world are already aware of what I'm publishing. I gave them, as a courtesy, an advanced copy of the information. And the hope is that this solid scientific information will be used as the basis for further research and development, and guide where the research should be. Obviously, the work needs to be done in the early stages of the illness. We know in the later stages of the illness in the hospital, nothing really helps, right? So the idea is let's focus on when it really matters and develop treatment strategies. And I hope they find something even better than the Zelenko protocol. I don't care. But the point is, it's the only bullet available right now. So let's use what we have now, and in parallel, develop more research to see if we can find something better.
Will you be able to share with us, I'm talking about right now, our audience here on Facebook and YouTube, that we can share the link that people actually can go and see it for themselves? Can we share this information with them?
I could just, I will give you the exact link when I have it, which I don't. It's going to be on preprints.org. Preprints.org. And then under the author section, just look for Zelenko, and you should be able to get it. But it's not available now. It's been submitted on Friday, and it takes, I think, 3 or 4 days, apparently, for it to become available. It's a process. So, and it's also submitted to one of the best, not that I care or respect it, but it has been submitted to one of the best journals historically in science.
Well, I think Lancet should be the first one to publish it, because they need to correct their false, according to their own admission, publication.
That's very optimistic of you, Rabbi.
Well, I think that's the first one at least to send. I would give them a courtesy and said, if you publish that, you should publish this. What about your website where people will share information? Can you please repeat this website?
Oh, so that's more of a global initiative called crowdprotocol.com. Crowdprotocol.com, and that is my attempt to circumvent the entire medical establishment. I tend to have rather big ideas and have a certain amount of arrogance or chutzpah, so to speak, to fight against the establishment. And this is that. In other words, it's a platform that allows for doctors to collaborate globally and to do research together in a way that completely circumvents the traditional system of research, which is to go through universities and go through governmental agencies. Rather, the idea is to create one global physician mind where doctors from all around the world, specifically primary care doctors, who are dealing with patients in the real world setting, generating real world data and energy on evidence, and that we can pull that information in a standardized way and be able to generate tremendous amount of information quickly and use that information in a statistically, scientifically significant way to find solutions in real time. Not to take 6 months, but to take 3 weeks, for example. So when one doctor says something, it's anecdotal. When 10,000 doctors come to the same conclusion, that's powerful. So that's one aspect of this website. And obviously that, my study and other people's information will be presented there. Number two, there's a aspect for patients, where patients could leave testimonials, which is very important, where patients could leave their experiences with COVID-19, let's say, and the treatments that they took. And obviously it's not scientific, but what it is it has tremendous amount of political power, because if 10,000 patients, let's say, testify that, listen, guys, I was sick, I was dying, my mother was dying, she took this medication, 36 hours later she was at the park, and you multiply that by thousands, let's say, then that's very hard to refute. And it has a lot of media PR power. And number three is for anyone else, not doctors, not patients, but anyone else who wants to participate. Participation could be in many ways. It could be signing petitions. Another aspect, we need to translate this website to every single language. So if someone is linguistically gifted and they want to participate and offer their volunteer their services to translate it to different languages so that the platform becomes more accessible to more people. That's another aspect of it. People can financially donate to, so that we can fund research and so on. So there's a lot of, it's basically for anyone who wants to feel like they're part of a global movement to find solutions that is not tainted by politics and or financial conflicts. It's a force of light, I would say, a force of goodness to help people.
Is it already operational? In other words, do we have? Can we actually open this and see what it is? And will you publish your news? In other words, when the publication of this, this study will be on that site, will you share it also on your site?
Of course, yeah. So it is. It's live in English for now, and we need. We had some people offer to translate it already into, I think, Portuguese and someone in Russian. But, there's so many other languages. There's Italian, French, German, Japanese. I mean, anywhere that's people, there's 200 countries dealing with this. So was it God confused the languages, right, by the Tower of Babel. So there's a lot of languages out there that we need to bring the message to, because the sooner the humanity becomes aware of this priceless information, the sooner we'll get out of this terrible crisis.